This video breakdown will show you how I use 2 lights to shoot this model. Here's some of the results. Let's get into it. All right, so let's start with this image. Without going too far into it, you can see there's a bit of a drop shadow here and a bit of a drop shadow here. If you look right under her chin, there's a bit of a drop shadow down here as well. But for the most part, if you were to look at her face and her arm, right, the value of light in this area is pretty much the same. And I could argue that to some degree or another, the light starts to fall off going this way, but you still get enough detail because you got a little bit of a detail in that buckle and you catch that highlight on the back of the shoe, as well as still getting some of the sheen from the stockings that she has on. So I want you to keep those things in mind, because when I start to talk about what modifier I use, you'll notice that that fall off being so soft and so gradual is attributed to that modifier. All right, let's look at another image. So we see the catch light in the eye, right? And then we see this hot spot here, and that hot spot here is also still the catch light. But I don't know if you can tell, but if you look inside of the pearl, there's like this rectangle right here. You can see it down here at the bottom, right? You kind of see it in this one. And of course you can kind of see it in that. But nonetheless, same kind of idea. We have the overall light. We got a bit of a drop shadow under the chin. So we have that punch that's coming from our primary light source. And then there's this rectangle, which I'll show you in just a moment. So I want to make sure that we can identify those different things so that when we start to look at the behind the scenes of the lighting setup, it's a little bit more clear of how they played in the image. All right, let's go to the back behind the scenes now. All right, so this is the overall shot. This is the behind the scenes. This is the primary way that it was lit. Ignore this. This isn't doing anything. It's in the background. So this is my primary light source, which is the Parabolic 55. I'll show you the light source that I used inside of it, but it's the Omni Light that's also made by Parabolic. And then back here, this light is an Aputure 600D. So I'm using this Aputure 600D just to lift up the light in the overall room. You'll see like the light on this overall wall and down here and all of that stuff. For the most part, that's coming from this light back here, right? That light is basically bouncing off of the back of the wall, and it's kind of illuminating the overall room to elevate the value of light in the room. That way that some of these things I don't have to worry about that are in the far left and far right and the high and the low of the shot. I don't necessarily need to concern myself with them, because I know that that 600 is going to be doing the heavy lift as it relates to just bringing up the overall light in the room. All right, so then if I were to go back, so the vast majority of the light that's going on to my subject is going to be coming from this light source right here. That Omni Light is going to be set at 100%, and I have it so that it's set up to be a spot, or excuse me, a flood. And the flood of that parabolic umbrella is allowing the light from the top of her head up here to her feet down here to essentially be even, because the beams of light that come out of the parabolic basically go in parallel lines. And if you think about like a softbox or an umbrella, the light typically, I'm gonna change the color. The light, when it comes out of those soft boxes, typically converge. So the light might go up, some of it might go down, right? Some of it crosses. And you could imagine that the center of that light source, as well as the edges, so like the center of a softbox compared to the edges of the softbox, might emit a different value of light. Whereas the goal with the parabolic umbrella is that the light should be relatively even from the top of that light source all the way to the bottom of that light source, and it shouldn't have any dead spots in the middle. All right, for the tighter beauty shot, the only thing that I did different was I added this little fill card, really just a piece of foam core. I have it connected to a cardellini, and then it's on like one of my little small rollers. And all it's doing is bouncing up some of that light that's coming from the parabolic onto the card and giving me some uplight from this angle. Let me see if I change the color. Giving me some uplight coming from this angle, whereas the parabolic is still just giving me that straight across light, right? And I'm not trying to fill in all of my shadows from below, but I'm using this card and I'll adjust the height up and down, right? So I'll adjust physically the height of the stand up and down depending on how much fill I want that card to add in. So then you figure my light source is here, that card is here, and I'm putting my camera in the middle, and then I might drop that card down, right? And it'll reduce the amount of light that hits the card that then hits my subject. Gotta love this drawing. So if I'm shooting in this direction, right, my light source is going like this. I'm basically going to move this board up and down and allow it to fill in or reduce the amount of light that's coming in. And I'll show you in one of these other images how that kind of plays a part as far as how the reflections and specularity will show up in the subject. And I only do that with the tighter shots. I don't really do it with the wider shots. With the wider shots, I get rid of that foam core and I allow just the parabolic by itself to be my key light for my subject. So you don't really notice it, the fill light in the 600, but that's what's actually adding this light back here, right, and back here. Now mind you, you can see that it's still kind of vignettes in this area, because even though it is bringing up the light in the room, it doesn't necessarily light it completely evenly, and then you start to get somewhat of a natural vignette that's happening around her, because the parabolic, the light is still going to be able to reach that back wall, so it illuminates some of the back wall directly behind her, but it falls off towards the edges. And if I didn't have that 600, these areas would just be completely dark. And I didn't want that. I felt like it was too much of a distraction. But that 600 is physically lifted up so high, not power, but the actual height of the stand is so high that it basically is lighting up here, and you don't see it in her eyes because it's too high above her eyes. Now that foam core is basically coming in so that I can still get some of this area down here lit. It also kind of gives me a little bit more of a pop on her hands, right? And it kind of cleans up some of the muddiness that might come from the directionality of the parabolic. That's it. Hope this was helpful. Let me know in the comments.